Hey everyone, Piano Man Chuck here, and today I have with me the Casio CGP-700 and the Kawai MP7. Now for all intents and purposes, the Casio CGP-700 and the Privia PX-360 are pretty much identical. There's a few minor differences, like the CGP-700 comes with a furniture stand which has awesome woofers built into it. Gives you a total of 40 watts so you can perform in a living room or gig at a coffee shop or a smaller venue. 40 watts of power, pretty awesome. And the Privia PX-360, which doesn't have that furniture stand, offers other things, but for all intents and purposes for this video, the Privia PX-360 and the CGP-700 are pretty much identical. So we're going to use that to compare against the Kawai MP7. And why are we doing this? Because basically the Privia PX-360 and the CGP-700 are Casio's offerings under $1,000, which give you a lot of bang for your buck in a stage piano or home piano. And the Kawai MP7, which basically is your typical, well actually it's not so typical, stage piano. So let's see what the differences are. First of all, besides the price, which basically the CGP-700 is $799, it's street price US, and the Privia PX360 is $899. Now the Kawai MP7 is around $1,800 street price, so you're talking about twice the price of the Casio when you go to the Kawai. Now, let's look at the differences. Let's start out with the construction. The construction on the Kawai, you got solid metal, you got wood side panels, they're finished, they're elegant, and then you go over to the Casio and you've got everything is plastic, which is really cool because that's what makes this 26 pounds as opposed to the Kawai, which is 46 pounds. Big difference over there. So aside from the construction there, metal and wood and plastic, let's consider the keyboard action. Now the keyboard action on the Kawai is basically, it's plastic on this particular model, but Kawai builds real acoustic pianos. Baby grands, concert grands, and so on and so forth. So they have taken that technology and transferred it over into their slab or stage pianos. So when you play a Kawai MP7, it's going to feel really good. That action is one of the best, especially for a plastic action. It doesn't compare to their MP11, which is wooden, concert series, and all that. That is beyond the scope of this video, but for the Kawai MP7, wow, what a great action. And we get over to the Casio series, CGP-700, PX-360, PX-760, PX-350, the list can keep going, but basically they use the same keyboard action in all of those, and it is a phenomenal keyboard action. I've got a Korg Chrono sitting over here, you probably can't see it from over there, $4,000, and to tell you the truth, I like the Casio action better than the Korg. So basically, they both have triple sensor technology, and they both have great keyboard action, but the Kawai sing as though they build real acoustic pianos. They've done a phenomenal job over here, and between the two, if you're a pianist, the Kawai is closer to a real acoustic keyboard action than the Casio. And if you were to just go according to the action, not have any sounds, even if you were to take your acoustic piano at home and somehow shut off the strings so that all you hear when you play is just the keyboard, nothing else. The Kawai is very quiet. The Casio is noisier. And, you know, it really doesn't matter because when you have a real acoustic piano, if you were to shut off the strings, you would have a lot of noise there when you play the piano. So what it boils down to is if you're in an apartment or if you're in a house where people are sleeping and you need to be quiet, the Kawai is going to be much quieter for you than the Casio is. Alright, so that's just one aspect of these. They both have triple sensor technology. They are both right up there as far as cutting edge technology. Alright? But again, there's like twice the difference in price between these two. Alright, so let's go over the connections on both of these, the ins and the outs. Basically, the CGP-700 is so basic. You only have the basic stuff. You can hook up a damper pedal. You have your left and right outputs to feed into an amp. That's pretty much it. You've actually got MIDI over USB, and you have an 1/8 inch, like for an MP3 player. You can play that through here. You go to the Kawai, and you have all that stuff plus more. You have actual line inputs. Not only do you have line inputs that can be recorded when you use the recorder that's built into here, those line inputs, you have a gain control over here for line in. And you don't find that on too many boards at this price range. So that's a really cool thing to have. Over here, yes, while you have an MP3 input, which is basically an 1/8 inch mini jack, it doesn't record that. It just passes it through to the built-in speakers. And as far as the built-in speakers, on the CGP-700, you've got basically 16 watts of power. You've got speakers that face outward, speakers that would face upward. Those give you 16 watts of power. And if you're using the furniture stand that comes with it, now you've got built-in speakers into that furniture stand, awesome subwoofers that give you a total of 40 watts. And that's enough for having this in your living room with a bunch of people over for a dinner party or whatever, small coffee shop, small gigs or venues. You can actually go out to a mountain or a rave, and I show you how to do that without having to plug into the AC power in another video. And as far as the Kawai is concerned, it's a typical stage piano, no speakers included, so you really need to hook up to an external amp and speakers and so on and so forth with this. Now, here's the cool thing. The Casio, especially in under a $1,000 price range, offers a touchscreen, a 5.3 inch color touchscreen, high definition touchscreen. You don't have that in the Kawai. Now, with the touchscreen, anything less than $2,000, you're not going to find a touchscreen. Now, when you go to the Korg Chrome, yes, that has a touchscreen. It's about $2,000, but the key action on that is nowhere near how nice the key action is on the Casio. And you go a little bit more money to the $4,000 Korg Kronos. You got an 8-inch touchscreen, but for under $1,000, a 5.3-inch touchscreen over here, which is different than the one on the Kronos. This is more like if you have a cell phone or a smartphone, you've got a bunch of icons, you can sweep your finger over to get to the next menu. That was what this is all about as well. So if you have a cell phone and you know how to use it, you pretty much know how to use this too. They made it so simple, you do not have to crack open a manual. I love this board. Okay. Now, as far as the sound quality, let's take a look at the grand piano on the Privia. Alright, let's try the same thing on the Kawai. Okay, so you can see the difference between the two, and as far as tweaking the piano sounds on each of these, yes, you can tweak them on the Casio, but the Kawai has so much more parameters that you can tweak. It's unbelievable. You can make this sound just like anything you want it to sound like. All you'd have to do is get familiar with how they do this. And as far as editing the sounds and all that kind of stuff, EQ, on the Kawai, you've got a graphic parametric EQ over here. You don't have that on the Casio. So the EQ you can do so much with on the Kawai that you can't do on the Casio. And as far as polyphony goes, you have 256 note polyphony on the Kawai, only 128 note polyphony on the Casio CGP-700 or the Privia PX-360. And this may not matter to any of you, but when you're doing a lot of stuff, it might be a little bit better to have that extra 256 note polyphony on the Kawai. Now, as far as splits and layers, as far as splits go, they each made it so easy to do. With the Casio, you basically hit the split point, you hold that down with your finger, you hit a note, and basically you have split the keyboard into a lower and an upper. So let's just show you here. If I hold down split point and let's hit this key. Alright, so now so basically, you see how easy it is to set a split point, and I'm playing a song with the lower portion being the bass and the upper portion being the piano. Now the Kawai is equally as easy, but it's a little bit different because this has basically 4 zones to it. The Casio, you can only set up one split point so you can have a lower and an upper. Now with the Kawai, since you can have 4 different zones to it, you can set a split point, actually multiple split points, where you can have 4 different parts of the keyboard, which each one of them have different instruments associated with it. And it gets even better than that, because the way you set up a split point with a Kawai, you hold down a key, you press the lower and the upper for that particular zone. You go to the next zone, you do the same thing, and those things can overlap. And where it overlaps, you basically have a layer. So if you set up this portion of the keyboard to be bass, and this portion to be piano, for example. Where they overlap, you're going to get both. That's a layer. It's a simple kind of a thing, but you can do that as complicated as you want, and you've got up to 4 different zones to do that. And because of the 4 different zones, you can control 4 different MIDI devices with it, because with each of these zones, you can tell it whether you want to have local control or control an external device. And it all doesn't have to be one device. Let's say you've got your zone 1 controlling your local keyboard, and the next one controlling another keyboard that does some kind of bass, and the third one that does some kind of organ, and the fourth that does something else. So basically, this can be used as a master controller. And speaking of master controller capabilities, with both the CGP-700 and the Privia PX-360, you get a pitch bend wheel over here. With the Kawai, you get not only a pitch bend wheel, but you also get a modulation wheel. So you have 2 things you can do with that. If you want to do that with the Casio line, you have to go over $1,000 to the Privia PX-560, which is $1,199. But which is really cool here is because of this touchscreen, it is so easy to set up that pitch bend wheel, which on most keyboards defaults to 2 semitones. So basically, if I'm playing a C, no matter what instrument I'm playing, if I move that pitch bend wheel all the way to the top, I'm up to 2 semitones over that, which is basically 2 notes: C, C sharp, D. And at the other end, C, B, B flat. All right. Now, it's so easy to use this touchscreen menu to set it up to plus or minus 24 semitones either way. So if I were to set this up 24 semitones either way, when I use this pitch bend modulation wheel, it gives me up to 2 octaves. Remember, there's 12 semitones per octave. So this is how you get those kind of pitch bend effects that you hear on some of the popular songs like Never Been Any Reason from Head East. That one comes to mind. And as far as layers go, I kind of touched on that, but basically you can have 2 layers on the Casio, and you can even go further than that, because if you set a split point, you can have the upper portion of that split have 2 layers, and the lower portion of that split have 2 different layers altogether. And as far as the Kawai, you have almost unlimited possibilities with going with layers. Now, here's the thing. Even though I can have 4 different sounds set up so I can choose one at a time and all that kind of stuff, with the Kawai, I can do the same thing, but because of these sliders, I can control the volumes or loudness or softness of all of those just by moving a slider up or down. And as far as the Casio is concerned, there's no sliders over here, but if you go back to the main menu and you choose balance, then you can go ahead and adjust the volume levels of upper 1 volume, upper 2 volume, lower 1 volume, and lower 2 volume, along with a bunch of other parameters. So basically, instead of using sliders, you have a menu that can accomplish the same thing. It's a little extra step or so. But this is the cool thing. When I'm on stage and it's dark on stage with a lot of the venues I played at, granted, it's light for the audience. You've got these bright lights shining on all the band members, which is cool. Everybody can see us. But I can't see the keyboard. So what I do is I have a smartphone with a flashlight amp, and I'm using that flashlight to see where my controllers are so I can set the volumes and all that kind of other stuff. So that's a cool thing, but I don't need to do that with this touchscreen on the Casio. Everything is backlit. Everything I would ordinarily use a flashlight for to find something on an ordinary keyboard like this, I don't need to worry about that anymore. That is so cool. Now, here's the thing. On each of these, you have a USB port over here. So each one of these can take any kind of USB device. In this case, this is a USB LED light on a adjustable snake. So if I were to plug this in to the Casio, I can move this LED light to wherever I want, and I can see what I'm doing, even if I have something on the screen. If I do the same thing, however, on the Kawai, here is the problem. While on the Casio, the USB port is right here, not at the very end, and you've got all these switches and other controllers pretty much dab set right in the middle. On the MP7, you've got it spread across. So, and because this USB controller port is over on the right side, I can pretty much use this light to see where I'm going about halfway through. If I want to see stuff on this side, this isn't going to work. USB lights are not powerful enough to get me this kind of distance. Now, if they had that USB port over here, I would be in heaven. I would be able to do everything with it. But because they don't, they have it over there, I have to use a flashlight up on my cell phone to see what's going on over here. Okay? So, that's one disadvantage about the Kawai. Now, each of these come with a built-in keyboard stand. So, with the Casio, you get this plastic keyboard stand that fits into the slot that's built in. And you can put your music or your scribbles or anything you want over here, which is really cool. And I've used that a lot. It works out great. And especially with that USB light that I was just talking about, can aim it right there and I can see what I'm doing. I don't have to worry about stage lighting being non-existent for the keyboardist. As far as the Kawai is concerned, you also get a stand that comes with it, but this stand is metal. And if I hook this up, right, it's really cool. But unlike the Casio, where the stand is here, it's part of the board, this one is a little bit further back. But there's an advantage of this stand over the Casio that the Casio doesn't have. Over here, if you look over here, there is a lip that comes up. That lip will prevent anything that you have over here from sliding off the stand and onto your keys. So if you have a tablet or something like that, you can put it on here and not have to worry about it falling. That's a really cool feature. It seems like a really cheap feature to implement, but Kawai did it, Casio did not. Now, when it comes to different kinds of sounds or tones or instrument, voices, patches, they all mean the same thing. Here's where these things differ. Now, the piano is pretty much great on both of these, which, as you've seen on my intro to this. But other instrumentation, Kawai pretty much excels at things like a drawbar organ. When you go to a drawbar organ on the Casio, you're basically choosing a predefined drawbar organ, and they're going to choose whatever the organ stops were on that. When you go over to the Kawai and you choose a drawbar organ, you've got control of all 9 organ stops. And they've done an ingenious way to implement this. So your 4 mixer sliders, when you have chosen a drawbar organ, those control the first 4 stops. And these 4 different knobs over here that surround the LCD screen control the next 4. So now you got the first 8 organ stops, and then the plus and minus or yes no keys act as the control for the 9th organ stop. You have so much control over a drawbar organ. It is so convincing. You don't have that with the Casio. And as far as other tweaks and adjustments, the Kawai has, let's say, pick a category like EQ for equalization. You have a graphic parametric EQ that you can have here on this screen. You don't have that on the Casio at all. So you can really fine-tune the EQ when it comes to Kawai. Now, as far as recording goes, both can do MIDI recording. Both can do audio recording onto, say, a USB flash drive. But the Casio has a built-in 17-track sequencer or DAW, whatever you want to call it, complete with punch-in capabilities and all that kind of stuff, which you really don't see in under $1,000, but Casio has managed to do that and give that to you at that price. That's one of the reasons I love Casio. Now Kawai, even though they don't have that, they have a way of doing audio overdub, which if you know what you're doing and you can do things without making a mistake, you can make it sound just like a sequencer, so where you can add one track, then add something else on top of that, and so on and so forth. Okay? So they're both really cool when it comes to recording. And the USB capabilities of each, they're pretty much identical. And like I said earlier, each one of them has MIDI over USB, which will get you onto a computer system. But when you want to hook up to another USB device, the Kawai has MIDI 5-pin in, out, and through jacks. The CGP-700 doesn't have any of that, and the Privia PX-360 has an in and an out/through jack, 2 jacks. Okay. Now the CGP-700, if you want to use other MIDI devices other than your computer, you're going to have to go with something like a Kenton USB adapter, which will take your compliant USB MIDI over USB and convert that over to standard 5-pin DIN MIDI. I have a video that's dedicated just for that, so search for that and you'll see what that's all about. Now the pedals that come with this, each one of these come with a damper pedal, but the Kawai comes with this really professional half pedal, and so you can do half pedaling with this. And the Casio comes with this cheap little on-off switch that you press with your foot. It's not half damper or anything like that, so I would highly recommend ordering the optional Casio SP20 damper pedal. And basically with this, you have more control with your foot than you do with that other one that comes with it. But if you want half damping or half pedaling, you're going to have to go with an optional. They have this thing that attaches to a furniture stand that you'll have to buy for this, and that'll give you half damper pedals. So both of these have drums and rhythms and all that kind of stuff. Under the Kawai, it's listed under the metronome section, and on the Casio, you've got a rhythm section for that. You can do all kinds of popular rhythms and drums, you know, rock and Casanova and all that kind of stuff. And the power supply to each of these, the power supply is built into the MP7. So what you have is basically a cable that goes from the AC wall outlet to the AC input on the back of this. On the Casio, on the CGP-700, you got a brick that rests between that AC wall outlet and the barrel connector that goes into here for DC power. And on the Privia PX-360, same idea. The difference is on the CGP-700, it's 24 volts, and on the Privia PX-360, it's 12 volts. So there's a difference, and I can understand that you need more power for the CGP-700, especially if you're going to be using it with the furniture stand and the built-in external speakers to give you 40 watts of power. That is so cool. But as far as either of the Casio series are concerned, check out, I have other videos that tell you how to get around that for each of those so that you can power this on battery power so you don't have to worry about an AC wall outlet. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. There's other differences, but I think I've covered all the main differences for now. So I hope this has helped you out. Piano Man Chuck, peace out. Thanks for watching.